I'd like to provide a little more detail of what transpired this morning when the officers arrived at the scene. So when the officers arrived and knocked on the front door of the residence this morning, the door was opened by someone inside. At this time, the officers remained outside of the threshold of the home, and they observed Mr. Pelosi and Mr. DePape each with one hand on a single hammer. It was one hammer that the officer observed. Mr. DePape immediately pulled the hammer away from Mr. Pelosi and violently attacked him with the hammer. The officers immediately entered, tackled the suspect, disarmed him, took the hammer away from him, and took the suspect, Mr. DePape, into custody. There's a lot of speculation out there. What we know is he was struck at least one time.
This was a very violent attack. The assailant hit him multiple times with a hammer.
Kobe Willens, the first officer, his partner Kyle, come through the door, and Pelosi apparently is still trying to keep this down by playing off, as the police come in, what's going on. Then he goes to, grab the hammer, and our 6'2", 250-pound assailant hits him in the head as the officers are crossing the room. All of this is on body camera.
Sources tell CNN the intruder shouted, "Where is Nancy?" when he confronted her husband. The assailant tried to tie up Paul Pelosi until, quote, Nancy got home. Sources also tell CNN that when San Francisco police arrived, the assailant said he was, quote, waiting for Nancy.
New details tonight on what happened inside the Pelosi home during that violent attack that left Paul Pelosi with a fractured skull and serious injuries to his arm and hand.
RP stated that there's a male in the home and that he's going to wait for his wife. RP stated that he doesn't know who the male is, but he advised that his name is David and that he is a friend.
Officers arrived at the home around 2:30 in the morning, where they say they found the two men struggling over a hammer before the suspect struck Pelosi at least once. A source briefed on the investigation says the alleged assailant told police when they arrived, "We are waiting for Nancy."
Been a lot of the reports have indicated sort of how police got there and they witnessed the beating at the time. And there seems to be a hint that there was a third person in the house. You've got some new details on that as well, Tom. What can you tell us?
Well, that's correct, Chuck. So the police chief came out and did a press conference later on Friday when most people had already started to go to bed on the East Coast. And in that press conference, he stated that there was a third person inside the house that opened the door for police when they were called to that house. And that's when they saw the struggle over the hammer between DePape and Pelosi. And then DePape, according to police, struck Pelosi in the head.
CBS News has confirmed that investigators have determined that the suspect had a list of people who he wanted to target. Sources familiar with the investigation say the suspect allegedly had a bag full of zip ties along with a hammer that he brought to the Pelosi home.
Sources tell CBS News it could have been worse. Pelosi held off the attack by asking the intruder to use the bathroom. That's when he called 911 for help.
He doesn't know who the male is.
We want to make it clear that there were only two people in the home at the time that the police arrived, Mr. Pelosi and the suspect. There was no third person present. At this time, we don't have information as to which of the men, Mr. Pelosi or the suspect, opened the door at the time. It was a forced entry into the rear door of the home, and that he ultimately did make his way upstairs, which is where he ultimately confronted Mr. Pelosi.
A source tells CBS News Paul Pelosi was able to call 911 after asking his alleged attacker if he could go to the bathroom. There, he reached a police dispatcher and left his phone on, giving authorities enough information to launch a quick response. According to San Francisco's police chief, when officers arrived, they found Pelosi and 42-year-old David DePape fighting over a hammer. DePape allegedly grabbed hold and used it to strike Pelosi in the head.
Are you planning to release the 911 call or any body camera video?
Not at this time.
What is your message to anyone who wants to push misinformation?
That first of all, it's disgusting, that it's something that shouldn't be done. We're looking at a family that has been extremely traumatized. If you could imagine having somebody intrude into your home in the middle of the night while you're sleeping and physically attack you. This house and the speaker herself were specifically targets of the defendant.
Jenkins said there was no security at the home when David DePape broke in armed with two hammers, zip ties, tape and a rope. Paul Pelosi told DePape his wife would not be home for several days, according to the newly released criminal complaint. At one point, the speaker's husband was able to go to the bathroom, which is where he called 911.
2 police officers arrived at the front door 2 minutes after that 911 call. When that door was opened, the defendant was holding his hammer, which Mr. Pelosi appeared to be attempting to control by holding a portion of that hammer. The defendant then pulled the hammer away from Mr. Pelosi and violently struck him in the top of his head.
U.S. Capitol Police revealing they have cameras surveilling the residence, but they were not being actively monitored because the speaker wasn't there. Sources telling ABC News that Capitol Police only saw the break-in after they noticed the flashing lights from San Francisco police in the video and rewound the footage. The Pelosi home was also equipped with a private security system, sources say, but it's not clear if the alarm from that system went off.
According to this criminal complaint, alleged assailant David DePape allowed Paul Pelosi to use the bathroom, where he grabbed his phone, called 911, and put it on speaker. DePape got agitated. Pelosi tells the 911 operator that the man told him to put the phone down and just do what he says. The dispatcher then asked for DePape's name, and he responded, "My name is David." When police arrived, Pelosi could not maintain his grip. DePape took the hammer, lunged at Pelosi, striking him in the head at full force, knocking Mr. Pelosi unconscious.
New questions this morning about the security surrounding House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Sources now confirmed to ABC News Pelosi's home had a private security system set up that was supposed to notify law enforcement if there was an intrusion, but it's unclear if that alarm ever went off.
This morning, Paul Pelosi is home, back at the house that became a crime scene a week ago today. NBC News learning new details about the moments police arrived. Sources familiar with what unfolded in the Pelosi residence now revealing when officers responded to the high-priority call, they were seemingly unaware they'd been called to the home of the Speaker of the House. After a knock and announce, the front door was opened by Mr. Pelosi. The 82-year-old did not immediately declare an emergency or try to leave his home, but instead began walking several feet back into the foyer toward the assailant and away from police. According to court documents, when the officer asked what was going on, defendant smiled and said everything's good. But instantaneously, a struggle ensued as police clearly saw David DePape strike Paul Pelosi in the head with a hammer. After tackling the suspect, officers rushed to Mr. Pelosi, who was lying in a pool of blood. Why Pelosi didn't try to flee or tell responding officers he was in distress is unclear.
Law enforcement officials tell us the bottom line here is this was a terrifying situation. We still don't know exactly what unfolded between Mr. Pelosi and the suspect for the 30 minutes they were alone inside that house before police arrived. Officials who are investigating this matter would not go into further details about these new details.